Welcome, everybody, to Traction Thursday. It's my pleasure to introduce an entrepreneur that I've had an opportunity to speak with on many occasions, and I look forward to his continued growth and progress. Now, let's give it up a warm welcome to Mr. John Huff. Come on now.
Hi. I made notes because my journey took me many places. So I can talk about the floating bed for hours extemporaneously, but this I needed notes for. I'm going to try to educate people on what I learned on that journey, and hopefully I can entertain you as I'm doing it. I realized it would really take a long time to explain everything, so I'm going to kind of give the cliff notes. At the end, I'm going to show you my take on how to make a PowerPoint presentation for any business, my take anyway. I brought this speaker as a prop, partly so I could actually see my notes, and also because this was one of my prior and still active companies. And as a side note, Bob's brother was our cabinet maker. So these are amazing speakers, not only because they look good, but they sound great too. There are several skills that I think will really help you in your entrepreneurial journey. I'm going to talk mostly about my strengths and what I can do, but there are others too, some of which I don't have. One thing you need to know is to innovate, because anybody who is a CEO of anything is changing a paradigm. So you need to have a unique selling proposition or a USP, and in an ideal world, you know how to use public relations, PR. So that's great because you save a lot of money on advertising. There are a lot of other useful abilities too, and one of them is sales, but unfortunately that's not my strong suit, so I need other people to help me do that. For me, number one, innovation. I'm always diving deep into things to figure out how they actually work. I'm pretty good at explaining them, and so I'm really more of a teacher than a salesperson or a closer, which is a totally different skill. But I'm always looking for salespeople to fill that gap. I like reading and learning, and that's a big part of any kind of creativity or innovation. Number two, for anyone who wants a better life, it's really critical to learn how to think. And think clearly and rationally, which is not something you're taught in school, but it's really one of the most important things you can ever learn, so I advise learning how to do it. Number three, you've got to have motivation because you're going to be spending a lot of hours. When I was young, I was seriously arrogant, and sometimes I behaved badly, I'll admit it. Eventually I matured, sort of, and I decided to do what I could to make peace in the world and to make society better and my own life better. So that's been the mission statement for most of my businesses since. Preserve the environment, stay healthy, be peaceful internally and with other people. So, looking at my abilities and interests, I became an inventor and a multidisciplinary entrepreneur. Also, anybody who's in a rut and feels the need to reinvent themselves or start a new career or make a change might learn something today, hopefully, or at least be entertained. We all need to keep learning, to drop any fears we have about an uncertain future and integrate new ideas into our life path. So, I'm going to start with my journey for context. We're going to get to the floating bed, which is my current project, so I'll leave this up here for a moment so you can look at that. That's one of the photos that people tend to really like. I was born in a little redneck town in Georgia in the Appalachian foothills. My dad was a doctor and optometrist, and I started in school working for him grinding lenses. My mom was a nutritionalist, so I was really lucky. I had great parents and I had mentors too. My dad taught me to be scientific. He inspired me to read scientific journals and like PubMed, The Lancet, serious medical stuff. And all my uncles were physicians, and I had a brother as a research scientist and another as a doctor. So that kind of runs in my family. On the other hand, my mom was a holistic. She was a nutritionalist into natural living, and she taught me how to do things that were healthy, which unfortunately I didn't listen to until many years later. I was also lucky. I had other mentors who taught me how to do things, to make things, and how things work. One was a school teacher, Roy English, who ran a science club every Saturday. By the time I left the university, thanks to that guy, I knew electronics, chemistry, photography, wood shop, speaker design, and a lot of other things not taught in school. Also, how to think logically. So I encourage everybody to look for mentors and also be one yourself, because the next generation, it really needs people who show them how to do things. I like playing music, and so I was in some popular bands around the South as a singer and a bass player. And I also was voted in as vice president of the North Georgia 4-H Club, which had 40,000 members. So there I learned a lot about leadership and public speaking. I did a bunch of TV and public appearances in high school and got to travel around giving talks. That was fun. As kind of a golden boy in our tiny hometown, I got 2 scholarships to Georgia Tech, which is a great engineering school. So I was planning to design solar cells, which this thing needs to come up. And that's what I was on the way to do at school. I saw the future, which is one ability I've always had, to see what's going to happen and be ahead of the curve with it. I realized that these were going to be cheaper and better and cleaner than nuclear power, which was the rage in the 60s. Seeing the future is a great thing. Doing something about it, much harder. So that's where you have to have motivation. Thanks to my dad's device, I actually did my first medical study. I checked the effects of vitamin A on night blindness, and I also won the state science fair by creating an inexpensive way to make building foundations or underground rooms using cheap explosive contained gases instead of laboriously digging or dynamite. It's a whole other story. If anybody wants to know, I'll tell you. Then I was off to Georgia Tech. Also during college, I worked as a co-op at Southwire, which is a big wire manufacturing company, and I was put in R&D, fortunately, where I really started my career inventing things. I figured out how to use citric acid to eliminate the scale on wire, which had never been done, instead of sulfuric acid, which is toxic. I also figured out how to use graphite as a funnel for molten copper, because it lasted longer than what they were using before. So that was all fun. But Vietnam was full swing, and our wire was selling really big, supporting the war. It was in all the planes and electronics. Price of copper doubled in 2 years. So I was really disillusioned, and I quit the job. I didn't want to be part of that. And I quit university, figured I'd work on my own. That was 1968. So I hitchhiked to San Francisco, 2,000 miles from anyone I knew, with $60 in my pocket. In my hometown, I had a lot of things handed to me, but what I really wanted to do was learn how to live without contacts, because I'd always had those to support me. That was a very rude awakening. I realized then I was an ignorant hick, and San Francisco was the big leagues. Some people have low self-esteem, but I suffered from high self-esteem. I was like a really arrogant guy. So that took half of that away, which was good. I landed on the street the first day, long story, but eventually I started figuring how things worked. And in time I met a partner there, and we started an import company, which I don't have slides of. But we brought things from Afghanistan, like clothes and rugs, first in small quantities, but then, because that was the thing then, it just completely took off. Meanwhile, I had filed as a conscientious objector to the Vietnam War, and the law says they owe you a day in court to prove it, but no, they just drafted me, which was quite annoying. I'd been athletic in high school, and I was on the tennis and swim team. I swam at university, so back then I was pretty beefy for a little guy. Looking at the requirements, though, I saw that underweight was an inarguable deferment, and I knew that they were not going to take anything inarguable. So, as a San Francisco hippie, I thought, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. I did a spiritual fast, but also took lots of drugs for 3 months to make it easier, in keeping with the local ways. I did get out of the draft, but I completely wrecked my metabolism. Big setback. That was a low point, both for my health and attitude, which were really suffering. All that pain renewed my interest in health, so I went deeply back into medical studies and started thinking about what my mom had tried to tell me. Back then, you had to go to the libraries to do any of that because there was no internet. I learned a lot about the body and health and metabolism, which ultimately became the basis of my next business. Yet to this day, I never gained that weight back, which was a big price to pay for not wanting to go kill people. The biggest thing I did to get healthy, though, was spiritual, and that matters the most. I learned to meditate. The drive for war had led me to a party lifestyle and didn't really care if I lived or not. Meditating for me was like suddenly turning on the light in a dark room. It changed everything, so I totally cleaned up. Back to practical life, I took my import company money, which was good, and what I was learning about health, and partnered up to start a natural food company, Love Natural Foods, which is, oh yeah, I didn't show you Southwire. This is one of the machines I helped design at Southwire. This is molten copper, and there's a graphite funnel down there. This is a side view of the machine. Anyway, back to Nazar, the natural food company. My studies had taught me a lot about the optimum fuel for our bodies. We created the first sugar-free energy bar, which was a new idea because then there were no sugar-free bars. Everything was cheap and unhealthy. Our bars were tasty. They were an actual meal replacement with no cheap fillers, no sugar. They had bee pollen, almonds, chia seeds, and other ingredients that people thought were too expensive to put in a candy bar. So our best bars also had 2 grams of ginseng root, which no one had ever put in a food product before. So everybody before chewed the root or made tea. Even though our bars cost 4 times more than the competing or so-called competing bars, we sold them like hotcakes. It was a paradigm shift. We also made, so these are the bars, and that's the back. And we also made Love Burger, which you can still buy in a few stores. It became famous too. But unfortunately, during that time, I learned one of my first hard business lessons, which is get the right partner. My guy refused to get mass distribution, which had just started to happen in the health food industry. So rather than argue with him to the end, I'd walked away and gave him the company because my import company was making tons of money, and I thought, whatever, I'll do something else. But that was very sad because our bars would still be the best bars anywhere, even today. So, lesson, choose your partners well. So I was in San Francisco and I had time and money to burn, so I started playing music in earnest. I'd been doing that in Georgia for a long time, so I ended up in the Grateful Dead family, and Jerry Garcia's older brother joined my band. I got more experience. I became a Warner Brothers artist, a songwriter, a producer for bands I was in. I worked my way up to play with some of the Steely Dan guys, Mike Love of the Beach Boys, Jan and Dean. I became president of Love Songs Film Company, vice president of music publishing. I made some movie and soundtrack deals for other people while I was there. I got the music in John Travolta's second film, right after Saturday Night Fever. And I sang in place of Jan and Dean after his infamous car wreck. I got to tour the world, I moved to Europe, made more records, had fun. Also during that time though, as a quirk, I studied massage at UCSB and also learned about the lymphatic system with Dr. Jim Spira, which came in really handy in a surprise way later. I'm not sure what I got for slides. Oh yeah, here's me during the Nazar years with some Nazar Energy shirt on, and oh, this is the flute, but I have to show it. I ended by accident on the cover of the Rolling Stone. I was a photographer for a little newspaper in Atlanta, the Great Speckled Bird, and that's me at 19 years old. This was the precursor to Woodstock. This is where those guys actually learned to do that. Anyway, playing music, I made a bunch of albums. This is one of them, Clean, Athletic, and Talented, a bit tongue-in-cheek, but we were. Here's the back cover. That's me, younger, touring the world. We had cheerleaders and the whole thing, a big record company support, so that was fun. We toured the world. Here's the poster. And I also, because I like to make things, I made our guitar. So I made that one, and there's another one, plexiglass, which was pretty cool. But the music business was really stressful. and I wasn't into it anymore. So I decided that I should move back to Fairfield or visit and relax and meditate. So I showed up here and I loved it, but I traveled back and forth a while until I decided that, a clean lifestyle was more important than anything else. But then I'm in Fairfield and the money ran out, so I'm not playing music. So what do? I started doing electrical work just as a kind of a grunt assistant, but even though I didn't know the carpentry aspect of it, I did know what electrons want to do. So in 3 years, I had a crew of 6 people, and we wired a bunch of the buildings around here, tech building systems, phone systems, computers, and that was okay. Also took a job as a tower climber just for some exercise. That's me at 450 feet. That was pretty fun and not really stressful, surprisingly. But after a while, that too got boring. Then I got into a side project, which some older people here might know about, which was America's Greeting to the Soviet Union. This is where I really honed my PR skills. Jim Lawler, this local business guy, woke on December 4, 1987, and was so happy that Gorbachev was reaching out in peace, he thought, I'd like to send that guy a Christmas card. Then he thought, I bet a lot of other people would like to sign that card too. So he sent a letter to the Register, who published it, and he got some signatures, and that was great, and it could have ended there. But I recognized that he had a really brilliant idea. So I called him, said, this is a huge story, focusing on Christmas and peace instead of anything else. No one could be mad at Christmas. And he had a winning idea, but he didn't know how to do PR or spread the message, so he started making missteps. Fortunately, he made me the director, and I did strategy from then on. The card was going from city to city. Here's a picture of it in a big truck. And we started getting on the news. Actually, I started because I got the mayor of Chicago to do a press conference. And after that, I had leverage to tell everybody else, well, the mayor of Chicago signed it, and then they couldn't really say no. So that was partly persistence and partly a stroke of luck. It got on the national news every night. Here's some, I don't have really good pictures of this. These are all screenshots. But here's a picture of the card. It was 45 feet tall and there were 3 of them really, 12 feet wide. Merry Christmas, Mr. Gorbachev. We had, at the end, I think 150,000 signatures. These are all high schools and grammar schools sent in their signatures and little pet rocks and trinkets and everything. So that was really fun. We sent the card from city to city, and we did signings at malls where everyone was Christmas shopping. So that started to get the thing going. That helped with our news stories. And then I started using my music connections, and I got signatures and endorsements from a bunch of bands, the Beach Boys, Fleetwood Mac, all kind of people that I knew. Then I started on politicians, so I got signatures from D.C. lawmakers and both parties. Reagan held out. He never signed. His whole thing was Star Wars. He did not want peace. But a lot of people in Fairfield came on board. Older people here probably know about this. We had a huge team-building effort, and it was fantastic. We held the send-off party at Peter Max's studio in New York. Oh, this is the World Trade... No, that's some mall. We signed at the World Trade Center, and then Peter Max, who I'd been talking to, became a big fan of the card. So I asked him if we could have the send-off party at his gallery in New York, and he was delighted. So this is a picture of that. Peter's not in the picture, but there's Jim, there's me, some other people. I got more slides of this. I don't know if they're on here, though. That was really fun. Oop. I don't know how that clicker works, so I'm going to wing it. Oh, yeah, here's Jackie Mason, the guitar player for Bruce Springsteen, Yoko Ono, Sean Lennon, Mayor Koch, Keith Hernandez. There were so many people there. I can't even remember them all. So that was cool. Steve Yuskevitz actually paid for this. We were totally out of money as the car's driving across. And Steve, who was a hero in Fairfield, called and said, hey, could you guys use $25,000? And we were like, yeah. So had it not been for that, none of that would have happened. Anyway, I went back to work and I thought, what do I do next? So I thought, I'll start a publishing company. So why? I was interested in psychology, interpersonal relationships, communication. And what I've learned, among other things, is that most people teach what they're actually not good at yet, and they learn by doing it. You see that everywhere. I wasn't great at long-term relationships, yet I was totally in love with this wonderful woman, Jerry. So I studied the principles of developing friendship, and I created this communication game, Breakthrough. It's really like a seminar in a box. I think that qualifies me as an Asperger's case. And I will point out as an aside, if Elon Musk, who also has Asperger's big time, but is technically astute, but totally socially inept, if he had studied relationships, he never would have bought Twitter and wrecked it. Breakthrough was really a seminar in a box. It's the setting, conversational topics to develop a friendship really fast, had a bunch of safeguards no other game had. It sold in bookstores. In that world, I met many writers and authors like Deepak Chopra, Johnny Gray, Jack Canfield, Marcy Shinoff. Eventually, I failed at the coupleship, but the company lived on. I think I got, here's a picture of Jerry and I at a couple of different conferences where we sold the game and hung out, and that was just delightful. At an annual book expo, I got these mixed up. At an annual book expo, I met this other author who had written the first children's book where the girl is the hero and she rescues the boy. Nobody had ever done that. And I thought, that is so charming, and it was poignant because of her backstory, because she had in 1980 a son who got a blood transfusion at birth before they screened for AIDS, and he had it. So he died at 6, but she put a lot of this stuff into the story, but made it, she didn't emphasize that part or even really talk about it, but mostly it was about the princess. So I thought, that's really cool. So together we combined our things, and here's her book, Princess Jessica Rescues the Prince. Well illustrated, little fairies running around and all kind of cool stuff. At the end, she rescues the prince and they're walking off, and he goes, I love you, will you marry me? And she goes, oh no, I've got plenty of other things to do. So, but I also co-wrote another book, there's Jessica. What we did was she didn't know how to speak publicly. She was very shy, beautiful but shy. And so I taught her to speak publicly and gave her confidence. And so after a while, I got her on TV all across the country. I was in the back scenes, and she would go on a local talk show and talk about the book and children's issues. And then I would set up a bookstore signing where, thanks to the TV show, she would go sign books, and then we'd go to a children's hospital. So here she is talking to a probably terminally ill child. And here's the other book, A Window of Time, which teaches a young boy about Alzheimer's because his grandfather loses his place in time. So that was a cool book too, which I was lucky to have a hand in. And then, jumping backwards, a friend of mine, Jim Clater here, had this idea to make a TV show called Future Cafe. I fine-tuned his idea, made it into an infotainment semi-reality show. I wrote the script, I invested my money in it, and I raised outside funding. We rehearsed the cast and produced the pilot at Hawthorne. Here's the cast on the set. And here's an example of what the shoot looked like. And that was amazing. But as they say, you learn as much from failures as success. And we ran out of money before a network picked it up. It's still probably viable if we had the money. So after years of working with people, I thought, I should go back to work with technology again. So what did I do? I started a loudspeaker company. This is an example. These are some of my products. These are unique because The tweeters are ribbons, which are very light, so they're responsive. And the mid-ranges, you can see here, are glass, so they don't break or make any weird cardboardy noise. And that's like kind of a rare thing. So pretty soon, there's my flyer. Here's some subwoofers. There's another speaker. There's a setup example. There's one in a house. And this is an omnidirectional speaker I made because the only thing that projects sound out forward is a box. When a person or anything is making noise, it's omnidirectional. And I can prove that because if I turn around, you'll see that I sound almost as loud as I did the first time. So this speaker is unique because this cone doesn't move like a back and forth. It pulses like this. So it sounds more like things happening in the room. So that was kind of a big deal. And the Perfect Vision and a bunch of other magazines wrote us up. So I started going to the CES, the big audio show every year. And because of that, there's 200 rooms with people showing their speakers and things. And but we had a hot room every year. So I wowed the reviewers and we got these reviews. And so all of a sudden, I had a whole business out of the blue because our speakers were innovative. So that was great. I could sit back and ship speakers and not have to work very hard. But I wanted to do something kind of more great, earth-shattering, insanely great, as Steve Jobs says. So I was making a lot of money on the speakers, so I had a nice nest egg. So I thought, what will I do next? And now we come to the floating bed. Finally, which is my favorite thing. Yeah. I'd been thinking along the lines of emotional bed for a few years, but I had two eureka moments. Years earlier, looking at nutrition and other things on the research sites, I saw dozens of studies that showed the amazing benefits of relaxing and sleeping in motion. But I wondered, as a rational person should, if motion is so great, why didn't waterbeds and hammocks and beds hanging from 4 ropes from the ceiling catch on? So I didn't do anything about it for years. The eureka moment was when I realized that the brain processes motion and has strong preferences, which was what pushed my speaker company to the front, because in that I realized that we don't interpret sound like a microphone. We do a lot of processing, and when I thought about the body, I realized it did that too, and I found out the reasons that motion makes you relax. You have better EEG waves, you have more circulation, and you feel happy. Any other motion creates anxiety, and I believe I have a prop. Yes. So it'll be hard to see this, but if you're on any device moving from side to side, in your inner ear you have these vestibular canals, and when you move side to side, that fluid in there sloshes big time, and it tells you that you're in danger, you're on something you could fall off of. But my eureka was realizing if I made a pendulum, not only would it not rock, but you could even swing it all the way over your head, and just as the bucket trick everybody, boys, learn in school, won't cause you to spill the water in the bucket. Same thing happens in a floating bed. So if that bed could go full over, you would never fall out. So belatedly, I realized that every mother in history already knew this, but I came through the way of science before I got that. I named it the floating bed because it tells your inner ear, your vestibular system, that you're floating. Don't worry about the explanation, because as soon as you see one and try one, which you can do today after here, we're going to go to my little factory. When you're on one, you'll see it. It makes visceral sense more than intellectual. So I had $250,000 for my speaker company, so I put all of that into the floating bed. That took me through product development, manuals, the patent, sales and marketing, everything you would need to get a modest mom and pop business starting. except the marketing. And everybody knows that you should have more money for marketing than you have for everything else combined. But I knew if I waited around, the product would never be developed. I would never sell it. It would be decades before anybody else happened to notice this. So I just went for it. After I had the bid, which took about 5 years of R&D and constant tweaking around, with no money, I started guerrilla marketing just by showing up at any public event I could get into, like LA, Miami, wherever a big city was. There could be a street fair, a festival, a charity auction, Earth Day, a film festival, TV shows, anywhere that there was a crowd. So in that time, I talked to for a few minutes and put 40,000 people into the floating bed. So I did an enormous marketing study, incredibly valuable, which, you could do the same thing with a lot of money, but I didn't have it. The second event I did, I actually got lucky. I got featured on the Jay Leno show. It took some doing, and that's a whole story. You can ask me about that sometime. But that got me instant credibility to get into other events, media, TV shows. Eventually, event coordinators were calling me, or at least answering the phone. And so I did that around various cities. And then I got hooked up with people and their bosses and their friends. So over time, we sold beds to a lot of people, some hotels, and quite a few celebrities and visionaries like James Cameron, Steve Tyler, Natalie V on the U.S. fencing team, Uma Thurman, who actually bought a second one because she liked it, Woody Harrelson, Khloe Kardashian, Al Pacino and his wife Beverly D'Angelo, Beau Bridges, Jason Momoa, Lisa Bonet, Colin Hay from Men at Work, Margareta Arvidsson, who was Miss Universe in '66. The King of Morocco bought 4 of them, and a lot of hotels and spas. And we have 100% 5-star reviews on TripAdvisor from hotel guests sleeping in them, which even I would think is impossible, but it's real. You can see it online. So I kept getting on TV. I was on the ABC show American Inventor. There were 12 of us out of 10,000 applicants. The bed got on the cover of the New York Times, a bunch of other magazines. We were on Extreme Makeover Home Edition and Little Girl's Room. And when they asked her what her favorite part of the house was, she said, my floating bed. Then I got the bed on Price is Right, MTV, Weeds, a Sears commercial, PBS, and more. So all this was great because I ended up with photos, which you would really need. And instead of doing little shoots like most companies have to do, where it's a fantasy shoot of their product, we had real people's beds, which you will see. And I designed the bed to be many things to all people because I knew as a small startup, if I just made it one thing, I wouldn't have a broad reach. So the bed became an indoor bed, a sofa, an outdoor living device, an inexpensive room addition with our tent. You can actually live in it, which I did for 6 months in Topanga Canyon. And it has the best bed in the world. So that's pretty good. At that point, we had a sampling, because of all the irons I had in the fire, of everything the company would need except marketing, because we didn't have the margins to get into retail stores. And the thing that really sells the floating bed is lying down in it. You can talk about it all day and people go, that's interesting, but when you lie down in it, your body goes, oh, now it makes sense. So we need to be in stores, and that's where the company's going. We're looking for investors. But we did get into a lot of hotels, some spas, waiting rooms. We're in the Dropbox corporate office and a lot of other places. All that's helped me spread the word. I'll try to get on to my business plan because this might go too long. But one thing I want to say, some people always say no to your idea, and I'll give you an example of what I say to people who are afraid their company would fail. It's the story of the hot tub, a parallel product that has similar users and placement, at least for outdoor use. Imagine you're 1960 and you meet a salesman. He goes, I got a product you really need. It's a bathtub. You're going to put it in your yard. It costs $4,000 or $5,000, but just buy one and ignore all the problems. You'll only use it 150 hours a year. Shipping is expensive. You're going to need a carpenter, a plumber, and an electrician, which will cost a lot. After you do all that, your friends are going to come over and you're going to take a bath in a tub of hot water with electricity hooked up to it. You would have said, are you totally out of your mind? So the thing that sold the bed was the demo particularly, and so now we've got over 700 beds out there, and whereas there's 200,000 hot tubs sold a year. So that's where we're headed, and eventually this company will get there. I probably should do the PowerPoint now. Well, sure, we'll save. Okay. Again, a picture of a bed. How much longer should I go?
You got about 5 more minutes.
Oh, good. I can get through half of this. Oops, don't do that. Sorry. Okay, so that's the floating bed, outdoors on a deck. But this is how we pitch it to investors. Our mission, help everybody enjoy better sleep, relaxation, health, and happiness. We've got 100% 5-star TripAdvisor reviews. So we've been fulfilling our mission for 20 years. This is who's in the company, local people, many of whom you know. Market summary, everybody has a bed. It's a huge market. Many companies are successful with Me Too products based on old technology. The bed is 1,000 years old. It's started as rope on a frame, some wool or straw on it, and it stood there and did nothing for you. But the floating bed is the first wellness bed because it has the correct gentle rocking motion. It's the first real advance in the technology of sleep, really ever. It's a paradigm shift. It's been scientifically proven to produce the best sleep. Even your mother knew that. In fact, she could tell you how it already worked on you personally, and it still does. But your bed does not do that. So you're sleeping in the past. The average American is not sleeping well, and they know it. These are a bunch of statistics. 70 million adults have a sleep disorder. There are 860,000 autistic kids in the U.S., and our bed does what's called vestibular therapy. It relaxes those canals in your ear, helps you relax, learn better, behave better. Medicaid's actually paid for a few beds. It's a long haul, but they recognize it, even without a medical code, which we want to get, which costs money. Gentle rocking is good for a lot of other problems too, like post-operative recovery, stress, anxiety, studies on all of that. And studies consistently find the top 4 indicators of health and longevity are sleep quality, diet, exercise, and stress relief. The floating bed helps you with 3 of those 4, which is kind of miraculous, even to me. So if you want to be healthier and live longer, simple answer, get a floating bed. It's the first wellness bed. But not all motion is equal. This pendulum motion is the only one that's good, whether you're using it as a sofa or if you're sleeping in it. And also, there's a thing called brainwave entrainment. When people are having a shared vestibular experience, their brainwaves line up and the communication flows better. There's a study on this, and you can see it happen. So we fill a lot of needs in a lot of different markets. Wellness is the big deal now. Everybody knows this in the last few years. Everybody realizes, oh, things can happen. I want to stay well. So we've got the best bed to do that in. Blah, blah, blah. Competition, that's the thing you always need to know in your business plan. The funny thing is, after my bed had been out a few years, some guys who saw a picture on the internet thought, oh, I could make a cheap one of those. And that's what they did. They made little tiny ones that you couldn't lie down or sleep in that sagged like a foot, so they weren't beds, but they were cheap. And so they started proving that there's a market for this, but they weren't beds, so we're still by ourselves. And also I came up with a bunch of accessories to make it practical, which none of those guys do. We've got a great history. So our goal is to get a modest investment, which will reduce our manufacturing costs by half. Then we can sell wholesale through furniture dealers, patio dealers, pool and hot tub dealers. And we found when we did those live events, our close ratio goes up 10 times with the 2-minute demo. So these are the kind of things you need in your business plan. You need real world statistics, and if you don't have them, you better go figure out how to get them, because nobody's going to give you money if you can't prove that you're not going to waste their money. Our bed also has romantic appeal, which is lucky, because Bucky Fuller once said, "When I invent a thing, I never think about how it looks, but if it is not beautiful, I know that it is wrong." And fortunately, the floating bed turned out to be beautiful, even though I can't really say I had a hand in that. It just, ideas come to me. See, ideas are in shared consciousness, and inventors, or really anyone who thinks outside the box, is just someone who can get quiet enough, hear those ideas, and be the first to grab them, but then actually do something about it, which is the step many people don't take. So if you look at history, most of the inventions you know about, the airplane, the telephone, the radio, none of those were invented by the guys whose names you know. Those guys had the money, and they had a PR machine, and they got famous, and that's the story. So that's why PR and money are both important. In business, we're looking for $3 million. We project that in 3 years, we'll have $19 million in annual sales and good profit margins. And our direct sales will make a ton of money, but even our wholesales to the stores will be good. So that money brings 14 people on staff to do sales here in Fairfield. It manufactures 500 beds, so we reduce our costs, little refinements to the technology, some more medical studies, more distribution, and of course, always more promotion. The risk, they're patent infringers, products new, we have to educate customers. Education takes time. It could take longer for market penetration than you expect, and there could be a downturn. But we have some things in our favor. We got years of uncapitalized yet really amazing experience making and selling it. I met all those people, and I know what people want to hear. So that's all great. So these are our key issues, which pretty much touched on all those. Now I'm going to just show you some pictures of actual real-world customers' beds. This is Prince's house in L.A. This is the people who bought it. He doesn't live there anymore. This is a typical outdoor bed where you have rain protection and sun protection. This is the singer of the band Player. "Baby, come back," that guy. This is a typical bedroom. This is use of the bed as a bed for the family or an individual or whatever. And this is the same bed, just with the sofa pillows set up as a sofa. This is a high-end model. It's called the Halo bed. It's got the stainless ring up top, very modern. People like that. Here's the typical porch scenario. So suddenly your porch, which you didn't use that much, is a bedroom and the favorite place in the house, because everybody makes a beeline to the floating bed if you have one. You'll see. I got on the cover of Natural Living magazine. This is a hotel in South Beach, right on the main drag, Collins Boulevard, in the courtyard. It's the first thing you see when you come in. This is the Dropbox bed, or one of them. This is a new rectangular bed we're making, because some people think, well, I don't want a round one. And rationally, you would only want a round one, but because that's not in people's mind, we made a rectangular one. This is a gazebo. This is an autism retreat center in Colorado. They got 4 beds. This is backstage at the Daytime Emmys. This is a retreat center. They have 3 beds. And this is camping or disaster relief, because these guys in tents are getting rained on in groundwater. And here in the floating bed, this guy is safe from everything, animals, rain, everything. That just about wraps it up. Oh yeah, here's James Cameron's bed. In his writing room, he wrote Avatar in there, all those movies. And there's an Airbnb. And this is the Andaz Maui Hyatt. So I've rambled on too long. I'm going to let him have the floor. Thank you so much for your time. If you have questions, ask me. And also, anyone who wants, we're going to go to one of my manufacturing spots, and you can see how we make the beds.
It's great. Let's give it up for John. Wow. Right here in Fairfield. We could just have you come back and just do it one chapter at a time, because that was just the Reader's Digest version. We do have time for a couple of quick questions for John, if you have one. Yeah, Andrew.
I imagine there's a lot of interest in this bed for romantic connubial bliss. And I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
I'll say two things. One, it is great for that. But secondly, and more importantly, a lot of teenagers buy this bed, they nag their parents till they buy it, and if we become that bed, we will never sell to that market. So I just don't say anything about that. But I also know this, those people who are just into the sex, surprisingly, they don't usually buy it. People who want better health buy it. I know because I did 5 parties at the Playboy Mansion. They paid me $1,000 every time to bring it up and set it up and show it and bunnies in it and everything. Nobody ever bought a floating bed there. Not one.
How about that? So we're keeping a good PG rating here too, Jason.
What kind of patent protection do you have on it?
I had a patent because I was first. Patents expire, so mine has expired. But there's other things you can do, continuation in part. Patent law is so complicated. That's a 2-hour lecture in itself. But most people agree that your trademark and first to market is far more important than your patent. And we've got that in spades.
There you go. We have time for one more question. Any more questions? John will be giving, well, go ahead.
I'll make a comment. I actually was a subject of John's. I spent the first night in the bed, and I said, kind of interesting, sort of weird, but kind of interesting. I spent the second night in the bed, I said, I get it. It was amazing. Then I went back to my regular bed, and it was like really not a good experience.
They always say when you go camping or go to a hotel, the first night's the worst, and then after that, it's smooth. So there's a nice glowing endorsement for you, John. Let's give it up for
Thank
John
you,
one
Bob.
last time. That was awesome. John will be giving a tour after this meeting. So if you're interested in seeing his manufacturing plant, please stick around, and we'll head on over after that. We do have a little bit of time left. I'd like to introduce and ask Samantha Kitch to come up here and briefly tell you a little bit about SBA. She is, well, I'll let you say your own title this time, but SBA is a very, very critical part for small business administration and loans. And Samantha's going to tell you just a little bit about what she does and SBA, and then she'll leave information here at the CoLab and with the Economic Development Office if you have questions. And certainly you can talk to the SBDC folks. Kelly Prickett is also somebody you can refer to. But let's give Samantha a warm welcome.
Thank you. Kind of hard to go after that. I have not accomplished that much in my life. Yeah, I am the Outreach and Marketing Specialist with the U.S. Small Business Administration, located in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, but handle Eastern Iowa. Just want to cover quickly, what we have for you guys. My previous boss put it best. The SBA is kind of the umbrella, and then we have our resource partners that we fund. And those resource partners are all free for you to utilize. We have our Small Business Development Center, our SCORE Mentors, Women's Business Center, and Veteran Business Outreach Center. They will all assist with mentoring you, training, help with a business plan. Our SBDC and SCORE are going to be the best individuals to help with a business plan. So if you're just starting, that's the best place to start. But we are also here for the life cycle of your business. We will continue to mentor and counsel you through the life cycle of your business. And so if you ever have any questions, again, free resources for you guys to utilize. We also have our funding options. We have 7A loans and 504 loans. Those go up to $5 million. And then we have our microloan program, which can go as low as $500 up to $50,000. I do say, start with your local lender for a conventional loan first. Going to be a better interest rate. If that's not a possibility, that next step would be checking in on an SBA loan. And the last thing I just want to cover is getting registered in sam.gov for any government contracting opportunities for your small business, if that's something you're interested in. It can be a lengthy process to get registered in sam.gov, unfortunately, but once you do it, if you get one government contract, opportunity, it can be very big for you. As well as certifying your business as women-owned small business if you are 51% women-owned or veteran-owned small business. For example, John Deere, I met with someone yesterday. They were looking for, a veteran-owned small business to work with. So having that certification can bring in more opportunity if you're women-owned or a veteran-owned small business. But I will leave these handouts here so you guys can take a look at that, as well as my business card. So if you ever have any questions, feel free to call or email.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time and driving all the way down here to Fairfield to share the love and introduce yourself. And Kelly Prickett is also in the room, and we've had Kelly here before, and she is also a terrific local resource that falls under the same umbrella with SBA. So you have some great resources here to support the entrepreneurial community, startups, and small businesses.